You ever start recruiting with a job description or a task? It's just what you said, Jason. It's a vision. It's something bigger than you. It's a preferred future.
My name is Bart Blair. This is Season 3, Episode 40 of the Missional Marketing Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the show. Unless this is your first time listening to the show, in which case it's not another, you're a newbie, it's the first. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you're listening so that you don't miss future episodes. If you are new, we just want to welcome you and thanks for tuning into the show. We produce this podcast on an almost weekly basis with the intention of helping your church grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications. So if you are interested in seeing your church grow, reaching more people, and you have some hand or some say in your church's digital marketing and communications, you've come to the right place. We really want to create content that is helpful for you. And if we're doing that, we would love your feedback. Leave us a rating, leave us a review, engage with us in some way to let us know how you think it's going. In fact, we publish this podcast every week in video format on our YouTube channel, and we pin a question at the top of the comments section on that specific episode's content. And we would love to have some engagement and some conversation with you about what you're learning and what you're applying in your own church from the things that you're learning from our podcast. Or maybe you have a thing or two that you can teach us. We would love to engage with you there. If you haven't left us a rating or review wherever you listen to the podcast, we'd appreciate you doing that. You know how the magical algorithms of the interwebs work. If you leave us ratings and review, more people actually find the content, and we just want to help as many churches as we can. And you can leave us an honest review. If there are things that you think we can do better, let us know, because we just want to continue getting better and we want to continue providing content that is helpful for you. If you think we're already knocking it out of the park, go ahead and tell us that too, because, well, we like that feedback as well. If you've come here to learn today, you're in for a treat. Our guest, second time on our show, is Dan Reiland, who serves at 12 Stone Church, phenomenal church. And Dan is just a phenomenal leader. If you don't know anything about Dan, just Google him. You'll find probably hundreds of podcast episodes from around the globe that he has been a guest on. He is a man that just seems to have an endless supply of wisdom, knowledge, and experience that he shares with us. And in today's conversation, we're going to talk specifically about building strong volunteer teams. This has been a little bit of a theme in the last few episodes of our podcast. We've been talking a lot about volunteers and volunteer teams. And even though we know that most of you who are listening to this podcast are in the communications space, we still think that it's important that you leverage volunteers in your ministry. It's not a natural thing that we often do, but you know what? If a church hires a children's ministry director or pastor, or a student ministry director or pastor, or an outreach ministry director or pastor, there's going to be an expectation that those people would build teams. If you are a communications director or a communications pastor, you should also probably build a team. Doesn't mean that you have to have as big a team as maybe the children's ministry team is, but you could certainly find some people that could use their gifts and their talents and their experiences to help your communication efforts in your church be stronger. And we just want to encourage you in that. And so I think that you're going to learn a ton from Dan in this podcast episode today. Like I said, he is just like he's like a bottomless pit of knowledge and information and wisdom and leadership. The guy's amazing. I hold him in super high regard. You can see my guitar stuff on the wall back here. Like, Dan has a guitar collection too that puts most people to shame. He's got a lot of guitars. Although we didn't talk about this in episode, I know this about Dan. He's got a lot of guitars. He's totally into his guitars. That has nothing to do with this week's episode. So I'm just going to stop rambling, and I'm going to turn things over to Jason Hamrock, the CEO of Missional Marketing, and our conversation with Dan Reiland about how to build a strong volunteer team for your church. Here's our interview.
Hey, Dan, welcome to the show. How you been?
Good, Bart. It's been a little while, Bart and Jason, I should say, but I'm doing great. Probably the biggest thing since we've last connected is my daughter, who has a 3-year-old, my 3-year-old granddaughter, Anza, who we love, also recently gave birth to identical twin boys. Oh. So we are having a blast. The family joke is, when we're honest, we can't tell them apart.
Oh, congratulations, Grandpa. That's
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's life-changing. Yeah, you go from 1 to 3. Wow.
So she has now, Mackenzie now has 3 under 3. And I'm telling you, she's tough. I mean, feeding 2, waking 2, changing 2, chasing 2. I mean, they're 7 months old now, and oh my gosh.
That's
Wow.
The beauty of being I'm Papa. The beauty of being a Papa is you hand them back and see ya.
Yeah. Shake them up a little bit.
That's right.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show. You've been on before. Just really love leaning into your wisdom and your advice and your years of experience in ministry. So I'm excited about our topic today, because you have been around for a minute, I think, or two.
For a minute.
So,
Yeah, I think I started in the Jurassic era. Fortunately, I still have a lot of life and energy in me, and they're letting me still be in the game. So I'm going to stay in as long as they let me.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, just give a little bit of background, your story, and kind of your overview of all the different paths you've worn in ministry.
Sure. Well, staying on the personal side, that's a good heart connect. Been married 42 years. My lovely wife, Patty, who everybody loves, they tolerate me. They love her. Yep. And 2 grown children. I've just mentioned my grandkids, so that's good. Matching number of years, 42 years in ministry. I started when I was 12. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
But to your question, I've been an executive pastor basically about 20 years for John Maxwell and 20 years for Kevin Myers. And in the middle there, a little bit of overlap with John. The Enjoy days, traveling the country, the cassette tapes, you young ones, Google that. But just, a whole host of teaching, writing, coaching churches around the country. Still get to do that. But my primary second chair role for decades has been executive pastor. And of course, you know what that is, the leading staff, ministry architecture, leadership development. It's just a fully orbed connection to the church. Bottom line, I love the church. I'm called, and I'm still having a blast.
Praise God for that. And let's hope it keeps going on, because you bring a lot to the table. So the topic we kind of want to dive into today is, and there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of noise around this, and that is, building and engaging a volunteer team. And so you recently wrote a blog post about it, and why? There's a lot to that blog post we want to kind of dive into, but why is volunteer teams considered a felt need for the local church?
Yeah, it really is, Bart, in a big way. I think we're post-COVID. I try not to be the guy talking about COVID all the time. I think we're post-COVID. Churches are growing again. It's healthy. There's great need in North America in particular, but the effects of it are still real. I don't know a church that doesn't feel the pressure when you consider the things that have transpired. Things like, church and church cultures changed. People view their time differently post-pandemic. Habits have changed. We all know that church is more an option than a lifestyle. Hybrid church, good thing, but it has changed everything. Families are busier than ever. Travel ball, but we get it. I think Christian culture has adapted to that hybrid format. We were so good at it, they go, we like it. And so when you translate that to the new, and I don't know really what the actual number is, 1.7 times a month, 1.4 times a month, whatever it is, we know it's less. You don't have to do anything more than the math to realize you've got to have a minimum of 2 to 3 times the volunteers to put them into teams to cover the rotation as 2019 and before. That's the pressure.
So it does become kind of a felt need, because you're dealing with people who are super busy. Yet you need those volunteers to make the show happen, so to speak. Right.
And you don't want to fall into the traps and the things you don't want to do, and making them numbers and just filling spots. And so I don't want to oversimplify it, because culture is different, the church is different, we feel things different, you see things different. But in some ways, you could oversimplify and just say the pressure is rising because the need is greater, because you need at least twice as many. Yeah. And that by itself is a game changer. And that's to answer your question. That's why there's such a felt need.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to dive into some points, and I want to make sure I make the statement that a lot of our listeners are in the communications, department, not specifically only that, but a lot of them are. So you might think to yourself as a comm director, well, I don't really need volunteers. That's for children's ministry or whatnot. And that would be further from the truth, that you shouldn't be thinking that at all, right? That's a myth. You want to engage volunteers. And my biggest take on that is because God has gifted people in your congregation with tools that you can tap into. And so from that lens, I would like to kind of dive into there's 5 points that you make in your article. And so if we wouldn't mind, let's just go through each one of these, because I think these are really relevant for obviously people that are in the ministry side, but people that are in the operation side.
Absolutely.
For the whole
and can I
church.
chime in on the comm part as well, or creative or tech? Sometimes I think going back to just the number, sometimes certain teams and departments think, that's not really my thing. I don't really need to go that route. I remember having a conversation with somebody in the MD, the music development part of the church, and studio work and all the musicians. And they said, I can't even have a volunteer, because what I do is way too technical. You talk about, 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and 100 volunteers. He said, I'd be lucky to have one who could do what I do. I said, stop. Then get one. I said, you're right. You're right. They're super technical. They're uber skilled, but we would never want you to have 12. If you had 1 is a game changer, 2 is like nirvana. That's an old word. So I just want to encourage as well, for those who might not feel like it's your deal or a thing, even support fields. Sure it is. You just need maybe a more technical skill, and there's less of them. That's okay.
Yeah. Yes. So through that lens, let's go through these 5. The first one is the key points of this. Start with a vision-based invitation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think on this one, the vision-based invitation is, I think leadership always starts internally, and we have to do our best to not allow pressure to get the best of us. And pressure, and so time and, I call it pace and pressure or speed and pressure, that often squeezes out of the margins our ability to love and care for the people. And so it goes it goes task oriented quickly. And when you go task oriented, vision's gone, expediency wins the day. And then you stop doing the things that help you be vision based and caring about the people, which is, you always want more for the people than from the people. That's where it starts, because it's not about you and not about them. In a sense, it's about the bigger vision. And again, watching to be careful that you're not desperate, because that pressure will leak. So here's the big picture. I think I went off in the wood there for a second, Bart, but here's the big picture to that idea is a vision-based invitation invites people to participate in something larger than they could create or envision on their own. That's a big deal. That's a great invitation. Like, come be part of something that's bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than us, and join in on it. And that starts with a vision. I'll stop there. There's some little sub points I would add in, but let me stop there for a second. Yeah.
Let me share something with you. I heard this quote this morning and I texted it to myself. So I'm literally going to read it off my phone. And I think it's appropriate for this part of our conversation. It's said by some person named Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I have no idea how to pronounce this person's name. Yeah. You're smart, Dan. You know who this person is. This is what he said. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. I love that. Isn't that awesome?
That's so good. So good.
Create a longing. I think as church leaders, this is so critical, is that we do often see the spreadsheet of roles and responsibilities that we need to fill. But beyond that is the opportunity to invite people into helping the church accomplish its mission. And people, there's another famous leader that I I once heard talking about vision, and he said, people need to see themselves in the future and they need to like what they see. And so as you're casting vision for people, you need to cast a vision. They need to see themselves in that future and they need to like what they see. And so that's a big part, I think, of rallying volunteers to be more than just bodies that are checking in on Planning Center because I'm scheduled this week to hold this door or to pour this coffee or to lead this small group in children's ministry or what have you. But people who get how their participation really helps the church accomplish its mission and fulfill its vision for the future.
Absolutely. And you said it so well, so poetically. I mean, it was great. And I think that practical translation is, you never start recruiting. I'll use that word, but let me qualify that in a second. That's not always a great word. You never start recruiting with a job description or a task. It's just what you said, Jason. It's a vision. It's something bigger than you. It's a preferred future. I think I should make a comment on recruiting.
Yeah.
I use the word inviting. That's a better word. I still like to throw in recruiting because that's the honest word, but I realize that's not acceptable. It's kind of an old word, but I like it. I think some leaders like it because it's honest and it assumes you're closing. You're not going, hey, come join us if you feel like it, whatever. It's really like, no, God's got a place for you. We want you. We'd love to see you step into it, not to our agenda, but God's agenda for you. And that's when it becomes big, when it's the vision, it's about what God has for them, all of those things combined.
Well, that's the second point then, is to be aware of any potential hindrances to recruiting. So give us a couple, what does that mean and what would those be?
There's a lot. I think I've made all the mistakes over many years, but I think here's the one that I have fallen guilty of many times is I think, oh, they're so busy, I don't want to bother them, and I'm robbing them, and I've had to learn over the years, I'm robbing them of an invitation. I'm robbing them of something God's designed, and I had to sort of get over bothering them. I'm not bothering them at all. And if I do it in a grace-filled way, a gracious way, an inviting way, an attractive way, they have their freedom to say no. I had to learn to let them say no. How silly was I that I was saying no for them?
Yeah.
By saying I don't want to bother them. Another one is failing to see their potential, and I probably was stronger than that one. I think I do see people's potential, but some of the listeners might size them up, judge a book by the cover. They might kind of miss something there because they didn't see the potential that comes from training, or some who have been very honest about insecurities. Another one would be a fear of being turned down. They just don't want to be turned down. I think a couple more. This one is a little bit of an indictment on some of us, but let's just be honest with it, is that pattern or the history of invite and abandon. I think sometimes we bring them in, they say yes, we sign them up, we say, here you go, and we're gone. And it's not, I don't mean it to indict something like from the dark side. It's because leaders are so busy, they run to the next. But that's why there's, systems and different things in place to help us make sure we're caring for the team. I'll give one more. Inviting or recruiting, or I like discovering, helping people discover their place on the team. The same people over and over again because they're easy and they say yes. And there's plenty of people out there. We just need to go ask them to allow us to come alongside and help them discover what God's got in mind.
Hey, Bart Blair here. I'm the producer of Missional Marketing's Church Growth Interviews podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Missional Marketing, we're passionate about helping churches reach more people for Jesus online. And one of the ways that we do that is by helping churches acquire more new visitors to their website utilizing the Google Ad Grant. Google offers qualifying nonprofits, including churches, up to $10,000 a month in advertising. That means that you, as a church, could be using Google as one of your primary digital outreach strategies to communicate the gospel and reach more people in your community. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website at missionalmarketing.com and click the link at the top of the page that says Google Grants. We'd love an opportunity to partner with you in your mission to build God's kingdom here on earth. Well, thanks again for listening to our podcast. And now back to the show.
You said just a second ago there, though, it's like easy to like set it and forget it almost as a leader.
Yeah.
So your third one is make a personal investment. I'm kind of guessing that's into the people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a process both in the process of helping somebody discover and join a team. And then when they're in there, and then when they're getting on the team and then staying in, there's really three, specific kinds of investments. The investment to pour enough time into them to get to know them, to care about them as an individual, and then actually, what you might call for a staff member onboarding. Well, you have to onboard everybody, and to do that in a legitimate, fulfilling, it covers all the bases way. And then there's ongoing training. So there is a personal investment. It takes time. They need to know you care. And that's where it starts.
On a side note, how often, like if you had to tell one of your staff people that lean on volunteers a lot, what would you say, how much time should they spend investing into volunteers versus actually programming?
That's a tough question to answer, Bart, because I think there's a cumulative effect on two sides of the spectrum. One is the cumulative is it's almost like a bank account. The longer you invested in, the more that time multiplies, and you don't have to spend as much time. They know you, they trust you. There's a bank account. There's a relational equity that's established. That's from us to them, and then from, I don't want to say them to us. That sounds so terrible, but the investment of time up front can diminish some because of that equity that's developed. On the other side, it's their level of maturity. As they mature, as they understand, as they realize it's not all about me, someone doesn't have to be by me all the time. At some point, I'm going to go find and help other people join the team. Between the two of those, the level of time is still there, still has to be kept up, but it's the points of contact can be briefer and farther apart, and still just as meaningful, months and years down the road, where up front, the investment is pretty hefty. I don't know that I can give, Bart, or actually a formula, because every church is different, but it's more upfront for sure.
We just recently, I mentioned, I think before we started recording, that we'd recently interviewed a friend of ours named Mary Ann Sibley, who coaches churches and works with them to help develop their volunteer teams. And one of the things that she really has a heart for making sure that churches do is that volunteer leaders, those that are leading, see their role as being more than just a get the task done leader, but to see people actually growing in their faith journey. As leaders, the reason we should want people serving in our church is not just to help us get the job done, because it's good for them to be using their gifts and their talents in the context of ministry. I mean, that's the way that God has wired us and made us. And so as a leader of volunteers, whether you're a staff member leading volunteers or you're a volunteer yourself leading other volunteers, there's a shepherding responsibility, a shepherding aspect that you have. And I think that in and of itself is what will really demonstrate your commitment to them. And I think it makes for healthier teams, and it makes for more longevity in people's ability and willingness to stay with the team that they've been asked to join.
No question. Yep.
Okay, so now the fourth one, we've covered three so far. The fourth one is make training a top priority. How do you do that?
Yes, I love this question. I'm a trainer at heart. I love both the equipping and developing side. We actually stop there for a second. We have to give extra stuff that's not in the post, right? I think it's important in this arena to distinguish the difference between equipping and developing. And equipping is, you can build a great church on equipping. I think legacy churches include developing. A couple of simple differences are equipping trains people for a very specific ministry task. An usher, how to do CPR, a small group leader, how to lead a great discussion. You're training for a specific task. Development pours into the individual so they're a bigger, better, stronger person. The equipping is a transaction. I'll train you how to do this if you'll do this. Nothing wrong with that. And then development is more of a gift. Equipping is based on the church's agenda, obviously great, the vision, the Great Commission.
Mhm.
Development's based on the person's agenda. What do they need? Where are they going? You can see the difference, and obviously there's a blend and blur between the two, but smart churches know the difference to make sure they have both. Equipping environments and developmental, because they're completely different in nature. They feel different, they look different, all that kind of a thing. But both groups of people, the group of the people need both. They just need them at the right times and the right way. So back to the topic of training overall, people want to be successful. They want to win. And I think volunteer teams want to win in the same way. I mean, when I'm rooting here for the Braves or the Falcons, I think I don't know if they're going to win, but we sure want them to win, right? I mean, and people are the same way. And I think right underneath that, we can't assume that volunteers, one, know what we expect, or that they know how. Something might be simple to the leader, but it doesn't mean they know how, and it doesn't mean they know what you expect them to do. So that's at the top of training, right underneath the fact that you care and that they know it. I think there's some things, a couple of 3 points that help training be worth going to. So if we can be blunt, I think one of the worst things we can do is have somebody volunteer their time, show up, show they care, say, hey, count on me. I want to help. I want to be part of this grand vision. And they show up, and if we're ill-prepared, the room's a mess, the coffee's cold, the training isn't relevant, I think that's disrespectful. I think I always call it, this is old-fashioned term, but linen and four color. It just ought to be really well done, not necessarily taking too much time, but well done. Things like this, relevant. It ought to be relevant. If you're using the same training you were using in 2017 or 20, freshen it up, make sure it's relevant. The things we said and taught 2019 to 2023, they shouldn't be the same words. They shouldn't be the same style. It's not the same. Another one is practical. I think people really want us, and this is where I have a lot of flaws, because I teach leadership based a lot on principle. But the longer I do this, the more I know that just talk about how you do it. Speak directly into the actual responsibilities is so appreciated. And one more is inspirational. And it's, again, once, like we've talked, all three of us, all four of us, all three of us. I counted 3 people, but I'm one of the people on the screen. I'm good at math. Yeah. Make it stop. It's really important to not just start with the vision, but keep reminding of the vision and remind of the progress of the vision. And of course, we know how to do that. Tell stories of changed lives. Yes. After equipping and training and all that's gone on, then there's briefer huddles that, go on throughout the year for, quick connects and communication, what's happening, what's changed, how we doing. In those moments, we've got to tell stories to keep them like, oh my gosh, it's working, So, yeah.
I love that. I love that training, because it's not just training on how to do the job, but it's the bigger vision of why we do this job and what we're doing as a movement of a church and what we're doing as a movement of God in people's lives. I love that. And I think we just tend to gloss over that a lot because of time,
Yeah, it is. It's time. People, everybody's busy. Yeah.
Well, our tendency as trainers is to focus on the what and the how and not enough on the why. And I think it goes back to point number 1, which is, well, you've invited people to be a part of this team based on a vision that you've cast for them. And as you're training them, you need to continue to keep the vision in front of them and using those training opportunities. You mentioned telling the stories of life change, and Jason just about gave you an amen. He was getting close there.
Cool. I was like,
but yeah, Yeah. I mean, telling stories of people whose lives have been impacted by the ministry, by the volunteers, by the engagement. And I think that's, again, keeping vision in front of people should be part of the training, not just the nuts and bolts of how to get the job done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Oh, I love that. Training, top priority. Start with the why. Why are we doing this? Okay. Number five. Just recognize the value of systems. Okay. This is something I'm not very strong in. I'm okay at it, but there's other people who are really good at it. Talk to us about the value of systems.
Value of systems. Well, I'm in your club, Bart, because I'm pretty good at designing them. I'm a little bit more on the people development side of the arena, but I've grown to respect systems for a lot of reasons. So let's jump in. I think, first of all, sometimes we sort of resist systems because they don't feel or sound spiritual. And we think the spirit and system competes, but spirit and system do not compete at all. Yeah. Systems just elevate the spirit's freedom to move farther and faster, really. And so we actually become more effective when we learn how to work with systems. And also, I think sometimes in my experience, especially in larger churches, we tend to overcomplicate our notion of what a system is. The truth of a good system is they're actually simple at their most basic functionality. They make things simple, and they are simple. If they're not simple and they make things more complicated, you got a lousy system. It's fighting the very thing it's supposed to do. So here's some of the valuable benefits that maybe you can test your systems with. One is that systems help you stay focused on next steps. They're not just a circular thing, a busy thing, and an endless thing. Everybody ought to know the direction they're headed. In the church, I don't care if you're 150 people, 100 people, or 10,000 people. Yeah. What's the direction toward maturity? What's the direction, personal maturity? What's the direction toward vision accomplishment together, individual and corporate? And then what's the next step? What's the next step? Sometimes people say, well, I've come to the end of the pipeline. I'm already a leader. I'm on, what's the next? When you think, and I don't think anybody's ever arrived, but if you think you do, all right, let's just go there for a second. There's nowhere else to go. And I get that on a practical level. Well, then, okay, let's accept that for a moment, sort of. Then there's the next person that needs to be reached, and the next person that needs to be reached, and the next just what's the next step? Here's another one. Systems help you follow up more consistently. The longer I lead, the more I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit and prayer and vision and all of that, because it's so important to bring hope. The more I also believe that churches that win over the long haul are the churches that get blocking and tackling, the churches that are consistent in the fundamentals of execution. They just show up and do it and get over ourselves about I'm bored. It's not about us being bored. It's about us helping people. And so I admit it, I get bored teaching the same talk or doing the same thing, but it's not about me. It's about us together in a system helping the next person. And so being consistent in those things helps engagement, it helps training, it helps communication, it helps the outcomes. One more I would toss out, and we can talk about it if you want, is that systems help us scale the volunteer base. Mm-hmm. That's just a fact where you might be a skilled recruiter or inviter, or you pick the word that you like. You might be really skilled at it, but you have a limit. Everybody has a limit. You can only do so many, where systems help you move from bringing 1 on the team or 10 on the team to bringing 50 on the team or 100 on the team. And systems are really your friend if you still have to keep them warm and keep them have an elegant human nature to them, but they just help you reach more people. That's all.
Well, and I think number 4 does kind of combine with number 5, because not everybody learns at the same speed or capacity as you might, right? You're training people. Yeah. You have to recognize that constantly training them on the systems is pretty important. I've learned that a lot, right? I have to be trained a lot on certain things because I'm just not gifted. Yeah. But I'm gifted in other areas that other people aren't. So there's that recognition of it where you're constantly training. That's important.
Our HR director would be Barb. We love her to death. She would be laughing right now. She has retrained me so many times, I'm embarrassed to say it, in our Paycom system for the healthcare thing and the HSA card. She's going, Dan, the cows know how to do this. What is wrong with you? You know, and I'm sorry, I don't get it, you know? And
She's
so,
like, bless your heart.
yeah, exactly. But then again, I'm really pretty good at some other things. So you're so right. Some people just need a little more help.
That's right. Never let up on it. Yeah. Yep.
Dan, is there anything that we haven't asked you today that you wish we would have asked you?
Oh, how do I comb my awesome flock of hair? I don't know. I mean, there's one thing, if we have a minute, I would throw into the mix
Sure.
because it speaks to the bigger picture of the most practical element, which is the feeling of pressure, pace and pressure. And that is what we teach our team is the concept of right sizing. We teach to right size problems. And to right size problems mean, because if you look at a problem and think it's insurmountable, it's insurmountable. If you look at a problem and you think I can't do it, you can't do it. And so we call that supersizing a problem rather than right sizing it. And so it begins with giving definition. I'll tell a story. Now this one is, Bart, it's mentioned earlier, it is more in the more common area, particularly in children's ministry, but we can adapt this in any direction. Like we talked about the music tech guy. Okay, you don't need 5, but you need 1. That's right sizing. In this case, it was coming up on Easter, and this really quite gifted and wonderful children's director was just in a panic. It was 3 weeks to Easter, and they said, I get all these volunteers. I need all these volunteers. I need a ton of volunteers. And I said, okay, just, take a breath. How many do you need? I need a ton. I said, all right, what I want you to do, I want you to just take an hour, take a day, come back. I want you to count. I want you to go count how many you need. And the person looked at me like, okay, and so they did that, came back, and they had a number, 20. And I said, fantastic. All right. You need 20 volunteers to fill in everything for Easter, all the services. Yes. I said, can you recruit 20 in 3 weeks? No. Okay. I said, can you recruit 15? And I think a no was coming out again. Again, I think there was still frustration in there. Another no was coming out. So I said, all right, I'll keep the right sizing going. Can you do 15? And I jumped in and said, meaning 1 a day, 5 days a week, 2 days off for 3 weeks. Yes, I can. And then you think, well, wait a minute, there was 20, that's only 15. So I said, do you have a high capacity volunteer or 2 who could go recruit 5 people for you in 3 weeks? Yes, I can. That's right sizing. And we've helped so many people stop panicking. What's the real need? Break it down into pieces, figure it out, and they go, I can do this.
So
that was worth the price of admission right there. That was fantastic. I'm glad we didn't ask the question that you wanted us to ask, but we asked you what question we should be asking, because I think
You
that was
did good.
that was fantastic.
Maybe you'll have to say something up front so they'll listen all the way to the end.
I'm going to tell them, Dan said, you better listen to the very end. Okay. I will put that in the intro. Right. Dan said.
That's right.
Well, Jason, you want to tie things up here?
Yeah, no, just so appreciate your wisdom and the fact that you care about, obviously, about God and the kingdom and the church and moving it forward as you sort of, give it, you sort of wind down your career a little bit there as we were talking about before. And yet you just have all this knowledge. And so thank you very much for coming on this podcast, sharing some of that in-depth knowledge that you have. And we really appreciate you. Appreciate you coming on board.
That's very kind. And I quite enjoy both of you and what you're doing. And I know it's extra time, effort, and energy that you really don't have to do. So thank you for helping the kingdom move forward. And And you know what's really, really funny, and if we go over time, you can clip this out. That's okay. But it's interesting as I supposedly wind down a bit, a little less time at the church for a couple more years and more time into my coaching and consulting. Here's the funny thing. My calendar is fuller now than ever, and I'm loving it. But let me tell you something that you two might be able to look forward to. Maybe anybody listening can. Here's the difference. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm born again. So for 40 years, my calendar has been filled essentially by other people. Now it's full and over full, but I'm filling it. And I'm telling you, there's something about that that's just like, here we go. This is awesome. So I'm enjoying ministry, a different phase, and I'm loving it. But thank you again for the invite.
Oh, well, you're welcome. We can't wait to have you back on the show.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you, Dan. Hey, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Missional Marketing Podcast. As I always mention, if you haven't subscribed wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure that you do that. And hey, wouldn't this be a great episode for you to leave us a 5-star review or a 4-star review? We're not interested in 1, 2, or 3, just the 4s and 5s. Or you can leave us some comments on our YouTube channel if you found this content to be helpful. We'd love to dialogue with you there. And on behalf of Dan and Jason, I'm Bart, and we're out of here.